Well, this is the link for the presentation, tiny.cc/ham50. And there's over 100 slides in this. I'm going to skip over some of the slides, so don't worry, you won't be here till midnight. Some of them have a lot of detailed numbers on them, and they're hard to read on the screens anyway, so this way you'll have the whole presentation.
Magic Eraser and Mr. Clean Magic Eraser Sheets.
This is my contact information. This, by the way, is my new QSL card. They just arrived in the hard copies just arrived in the mail 2 days ago. And unfortunately, the train schedule for this summer has been canceled through September 30th at least, so I won't be on the train. If it's okay with everyone, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the presentation.
Okay.
So really, this presentation has really 7 different sub areas to it. And when you go back through the presentation, these are actually links that you can jump ahead to each of these if you want. And there's a little letter here, and if you can't read it, I'll read it to you. It says, "Congratulations on the new ham license or your recent license upgrade. I know it probably took some work on your part to get this license from the FCC, but I'm sorry to inform you that this license is actually a learner's permit. Fortunately, I have some very good news for you, though. Almost all of us started out not knowing how to do all these things when we got our licenses, even if it included a 20-word per minute code test, a long drive to an FCC office, a glaring FCC examiner, or sweating palms struggling to tap out Morse code. So go forth and use that new learner's permit to become a real ham. Sincerely, the old man, and best of 73s. So one of the things that happens is when new hams get their license, a lot of times they just assume that once you pass that license, you know everything, and that's about as far away from the truth as you can get. This is my 39th year as a ham. It'll be 39 years in July, and I'm learning something new all the time. So some of the things I'm going to go over tonight may be new for some of you, or they may be old things that you've been using for years. So we'll go ahead and just go through some of these. And it's not how much equipment you have. It's how much you listen to other people and how much good advice you get. I found out over the years. My wife always commented when I was a young ham, I would always be asking questions. And now that I'm an older ham, I'm always getting questions asked to me. So I guess that's fair payback. The number one thing to become a successful ham is to get on the air every chance you can. And that's my favorite part of amateur radio. A lot of people have different areas they really enjoy. My favorite thing is operating. So I'm on the air as much as possible. So I'm going to fill you in on some of the top secrets to getting your worked all states, your DXCC, getting on the honor roll, getting all kinds of awards. And really it comes down to 3 basic things. You need to find the stations, work the stations, and then confirm the stations. So let's talk about some of these step by step. And it's basically the old things that you learned in school about journalism, the who, where, when, what, how thing to find out where the stations are at, when to work them, how to work them. So who to work is who might be on the air. And there's a couple ways you can find out who's on the air. Number one way is by listening on the air. And then the other thing is by looking at various sources of scheduling information. So let's go through a couple of those here. So one of the things is called ADXO, and it is a site where they announce DX operations. There's a couple different sites. I'll show you one of the websites here in a few minutes that has announced DX operations. So I know, for example, this week there's supposed to be someone on from Mount Athos, and that's the only country in Europe that I don't have. So I'm listening for a station from Mount Athos this week. So my favorite ADXO site, and as I said in the presentation, most of the images are links also. So let me just click on this real quick, and that'll take me out to this website, NG3K. It's not a real fancy website. It's just basic HTML. But what he has on here, he has some very, very helpful things. And here's the announced DX operations. And it tells you when, what the station, what the location's at, what the call sign is going to be if they know the call sign ahead of time, how to QSL, who gave them the information, where the information came from, and where they're going to be operating or special notes. So you see here from May 7th through May 10th, Mount Athos is supposed to be on the air, and it's going to be mainly on 20 meters, mainly single sideband and CW, and they even given 2 possible frequencies where they're going to hang out. And I certainly hope he works split, because the problem with the previous monk that was at Mount Athos, he almost never worked split. So with my 5 watts, I had a real hard time getting through it. As I told you earlier, I have not worked them yet, so I did not get through. So you can see some of the announced DX operations. And then there's also a special section for contest, and it'll be pretty empty now, but there's already people putting in information. Well, this is from the WPX, which is coming up in May, and it shows the stations. And normally there'd be a giant list here, but with no one traveling, the announced DX for the WPX looks pretty slim this year. There's some other sites that have information on DX stations that are going to be on and times. This is a book that I found extremely useful. It's in the 3rd edition now. When I read it at first, it was in the 1st edition, and it's got a lot of good techniques on finding stations, working stations, and confirming stations. It's about a $15, $20 book. I picked up one at the Hamfest, the Hamcation down in Florida for $2. It was actually signed by Bob. Now, in addition to knowing what bands are on, you need to know what your station's capabilities are and which bands you're likely to be able to work someone on. You're working with the idea of what equipment you have, what antennas you have, but then you're also working on the fact that propagation to different parts of the world will be different on different bands. So my chances of working Asian stations on 160 are pretty slim. So if I'm want to work an Asian station, my chances are much better on 20 meters than they would be on 160 from here.
I got a quick question.
Yes, certainly. Go right ahead.
Do you have is there a different password for the phone in number?
I don't see one. Let me go back and see if I can check here and see whether I can see anything different on the site. Of course, it wants me to shut down when I'm in to go see that. So let me see if I can figure out a different way to get there. No, it's only showing me that 0V5BKN password.
Okay.
That could be an O instead of a 0, but I'm pretty sure it's a 0.
Okay. Yeah, I guess Arnold was saying he had to punch it in using the phone keypad.
Oh, that's not easy. Yeah, see, the problem is I don't have the deluxe account. With the deluxe account, you get a dedicated phone number.
Okay.
But unfortunately, I don't have, that's not the account that I have.
Okay, no problem. I'll let him know.
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
If someone wants to keep their phone on and let him listen or through a radio or something, he can go through the slides that way. So one of the things that was funny when I first started out as a ham, I had no idea which band to be on when. And I would do things like spend the whole night, middle of the night on 10 meters at the bottom of the sunspot cycle and hear no one. And then I'd spend the whole day on 80 meters trying to work DX and never hear any DX stations. So
any phone call is locked out with that kind of a password. I'm pinging up my other computer now to see what I can do at 98
Most of the time, the higher the bands, if you're not concerned about which band you're trying to work the person on, your chances are usually better with a higher band if you're using lower power levels. And also, a lot of times it favors it. The antennas work much better at that, those higher bands. If you operate CW and you can operate CW, sometimes it's a lot easier to make contacts with stations. Also, sometimes if you can work all different bands, your chances are much greater. When there was the DXpedition to the FT5 down in the Antarctic Ocean there a couple of years ago, the first band I was able to work them on was 30 just because there wasn't as many people on 30 meters. Even though I don't have a great 30-meter antenna, 30 CW was the place that they were least busy. One of the things with FT8 recently and FT4, they are extremely powerful if you have a marginal antenna system or running low power. I've been increasing my 160 activity. I run all 5 watts on L bands. And on 160, I have a rather simple sloping antenna. It's nothing much to write home about. But for a while during the wintertime there, when we had a lot of 160 propagation, I was working in new country in Europe almost every night on FT8. My best FT8 so far is the South Cook Islands with 5 watts on 160. And I didn't even think it was a South Cook station because it was a E5, and I thought it was ES. And when I glanced this through, I thought it was an Estonian station, which would have been DX on 160 anyway, but it turned out to be a South Cook station. So unfortunately, we're at the bottom of the sunspot cycle, but that's just the reason to get on 160 and 80. Seasonal fluctuations, we're coming into summertime, which is not as good as winter, but that's, again, what we're stuck with. And then there's also a 28-day cycle. So the band tends to be very similar to what it was 28 days ago. Time of day is very important. Now that I'm retired, I can get up and work 160 at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I'll work from 2 to 5 in the morning a lot of times. And that's a very effective time to work 160, which I could never do when I was working full time. Probably the most important thing for new people starting out, especially when they're trying to work DX, is you need to understand, you need to listen to what they're saying, and then listen to how the people he's working are contacting him. In other words, if they're speaking very fast, speak fast. If they're speaking very slow, you want to speak slower. Kill that phone call. If they say they're operating split, you want to make sure you operate split. If they say they're only calling for stations in the 9th call district, if you're not in the 9th call district, don't call them. So it's very important to listen to what they're saying and then respond accordingly. So a lot of times I might be asking for specific places. They might be asking for specific types of stations. There's an abbreviation called ATNO. ATNO stands for all-time new one. It means that you're not trying to get your 5th band with that station, or you're not trying to get your 3rd mode with that station. You've never worked anyone in that country before. So a lot of times they'll stand by and say they want all-time news or ATNOs, and that's what they're referring to. So it's a good chance for people that are just getting started to work in a new country. It's very important that you call where they're listening. Sometimes those stations will be working split, and it's kind of obvious. They might say they're 5 up, and they're working stations 5 to 10 up. So you need to be in that area. But even this weekend, when I was working, someone was not working split, but they were just answering everyone who had very low signals. It was much lower than their frequency. So I just set my split just for a little bit, and that made all the difference. Immediately, from butting my head against the wall trying to get through, the first time I adjusted my frequency and called him a little bit lower in frequency on CW, he came right back to me. So you want to listen to the people that is answering and then mimic them. So again, how are other people working them? You want to mimic that for the most likelihood. Tell enders, sometimes stations don't want the first station that replies to them, they want the last station. So you need to just figure out, are they answering the first station that calls them, the last station, they answering someone in the middle? So you want to try and just match up to what they're reacting to. So I always tell new hams when they're starting out to get in the rhythm, get in the rhyme, and dance the dance. So what you need to do is you need to get in the rhythm. that's their style. You want to match their style of what their operating is. The rhyme is the exchange and this applies to contesting, and contesting is a great place to work in new countries and new states, just because instead of you just being concerned with working them, they really want to work you to get the point. So, but you need to know the exchange they want, so you can courteously, even if you're not in the contest, just give them the exchange when you're done so that they benefit and you benefit from the contact. The dance is knowing how to operate your radio special modes like working split, knowing where to call him where he's listening, and how to follow the instructions of the operator on who he wants to work. Knowing your radio is remarkable. Once you read the manual, you find out that your radio has a lot more features that you didn't realize were there, or maybe you were trying to use wrong. So by knowing your equipment more, sometimes you improve your station much more than adding an amplifier or a fancy antenna. Just knowing how to operate your radio, especially operating split when you need to. Being able to use RIT or use reverse, have things in memory that you might flip to. So just knowing your radio is extremely helpful. You want to make sure that your antennas are marked very clearly so that you're not using the wrong antenna. There's no better way to not have your antenna work than be using the wrong antenna. So if you're using that 2-meter vertical up on your house and you're trying to use it for 160, it doesn't work real well. To tell you the truth, the 160 antenna will work a lot better on 2 meters than the 2-meter antenna will work on 160. But neither of them work as well as the proper antenna. I'm a firm believer in using a memory keyer, so I only have to hit one button to send my call sign, one button to send Ohio, one button to send Anthony, one button to send the exchange. So it just makes it quicker and easier. Voice recorder, I use a lot on field day and contest, and my wife really likes when I use the voice recorder because she much prefers if I operate CW contests because she never hears anything because I have the headphones on. She can't hear the key clicking. And she only hears me when I'm doing voice contests. But if I'm doing voice contests with a voice keyer that I've recorded the messages, I just hit a button again and it says what I want to. So just infrequently do I have to say something besides the things that are in my memory. I've been using computer logging since the early 90s. Matter of fact, it actually changed my whole career because I got interested in computers and then got off into the computer field from the medical field because I just wanted to keep my log on a computer. So amateur radio ended up drastically influencing my career choices just because I wanted to be able to log my calls into a logbook. I almost, if I'm serious about operating a contest or trying to work DX, I almost always use a headset microphone with a foot switch, so I have my hands free to adjust the radio, to change the split, to type in the log and things of that nature. So making things as easy as possible can contribute to success. I have 3 monitors in the shack now. I always have one monitor where I can have different accessories up like maps, or I can have the DX cluster up, or I can have the multiplier window open in my contesting software. So I really like having multiple monitors. And right now, as a matter of fact, I really like multiple monitors when I'm doing a presentation because I can view all the Zoom stuff on one screen and the presentation on the other one. Some helpful accessories are things like maps, and I used to have books and books of maps, which I still have, but most of my maps now are online, so having that additional monitor on the side is a great way to bring up maps. Gray line indicator, I pretty much use the one that's in N1MM software, the logging software, because it has its own gray line indicator in there. You want to make sure your clock and your computers sync to GMT, sync to the time standard. The more modes you operate on, the better chances you have to work new ones. Because some stations like that Mount Athos station before, maybe he's only going to work single sideband. So if you're not a single sideband operator, your chances of working him are much less. There's Arnold. Hi, Arnold. Glad you were able to get in. So being able to operate phone, CW, and digital modes increases your chances. And being able to operate on all bands helps also. A lot of people don't operate on 12 meters or 17 meters or 30 meters or 60 meters. And I find I get a lot of good contacts there because they're not as busy as some of the other bands. So how can I learn? How can you learn all this stuff? Well, you're doing one of the things tonight with this presentation, but talking to people who are experienced, reading as much as you can. A lot of times we can watch how-to videos now on YouTube. And the most important thing, get on the air and operate. So I have a little quick start guide that you can share with new hams. This is the link tiny.cc/newham. And again, as I said, all these are in the slideshow, which you can download later. Join a club. Well, I'm speaking to the converted already because you're already in this club. If you have special interest, you might want to join a special interest club like a contesting club. There's 2 big ones in Ohio. There's also DXCC clubs in Ohio. I know there's the Southwest DX Club. There's also a bunch of specialty clubs. And when I first got started, I was interested in low power operation. So I joined 2 QRP groups, the QRP-ARCI, which is a worldwide group but based in the United States, and the GQRP Club, which is also a worldwide group, but they're based in the UK. And for years, their quarterly publications were some of the best ideas I got, the little magazines that came out. This is pre-internet days. So I would always read those magazines that came out, and they were a nice small size. They fit in my lab coat pocket very easily, so I could always read them at lunch at work. But there's specialty groups out there, and a lot of them have good newsletters or mailing lists where you can share information with other members who are interested in specific activities. Many of you might have cut your teeth on field day. I know that that was one of the first places I saw HF operation. I saw a contest type of operation. I saw setting up towers, setting up antennas. So field day was very important. And as I was talking to Ed at the beginning of the meeting tonight, I just put together a presentation on field day, which is going to be in the new newsletter when it comes out from Scott. But I'll just go to the beginning here real quick so you can see it. It's tiny.cc/FDSD, and it talks about field day in social distancing world. I mentioned a couple books earlier. I mentioned the book Complete the Xer before by Bob Loker. I think that's a really good book. The ARRL Operating Manual is a good book, and it used to have a lot of resources in it that are now available online, though. So it isn't as important as it was before, but it's still a good book. And then I have a website, k8zt.com, and I have a whole section on all different things. There's a contesting page, and there's just a few links there. These are all links on contesting. DXing. Morse code and CW, logging QSLs, maps and charts. If you like to work the state QSO parties, these are 2 really good links right here because they have maps of the counties for each of the contests. If you've not operated much in the digital modes, I have a whole section on FT8 and FT4 and RIDI and PSK31. So those again are all on the website, k8zt.com. If you're not subscribed to the Ohio Section Journal, you need to subscribe to that. You don't need to be an ARRL member, and you don't even need to be in Ohio. Just sign up and make sure you get the newsletters from Scott. The group in Ohio does a really good job of putting out a lot of information every week in the postscript, and then once a month in the big publication, which is the Ohio Section Journal. There's also a news that I read every morning when I get up. I get it emailed to me, so that I use the push method where it comes to me, so I don't have to click on the links. I get an email each morning with the highlights of the day from their news articles from Southgate. Now it's a worldwide group, but it's focused from the UK, but it has a lot of stuff from every country. On All Bands is a blog that was started by DX Engineering. I write for that also, and you can get an email subscription to it, so it gets sent to you, or you can go to the website and read it. And they have a lot of good information there on technical articles, product reviews, and you can search for different things. And you can see some articles from me. I belong to a couple of emailing groups on groups.io for specific radio brands. I have an Elecraft, I'm on the Elecraft list, the Yaesu list, the WSJTX list, and a number of different ones. The Yahoo groups are being phased out, and a lot of people that were using the mailman.qth list are now switching over to groups.io. So just a lot of different emails that I get every day. Let me just bring it up here real quick. I'll slide over onto the other screen. This is always dangerous, but I like to do dangerous things during my presentation. I'll bring my email over here. So these are just mailing lists that I'm involved with, and you see that I get quite a bit because this is just noon here. These are all ones I got today. But I get a lot of very, very valuable information from people, and it's a good place to ask questions. So I learn a lot from these mailing lists, but they are so overwhelming sometimes. Some more podcasts. This Doctor Is In is being phased out. They're replacing it with a new one. I can't remember the name of it. It's like Eclectic Radio or something. I don't know. I don't remember what the name of it is. This is another good podcast. Solder Smoke is a good one. And then I listed some other ones that are very good. Some things to sign up for. These are all things that you don't need to pay for. They do have paid versions, but there's free versions also. And in my presentation on QSLing in a digital world, I talk about the fact that you want to go to QRZ and sign up for an account. You don't need to sign up for a paid account, but sign up for a free account so you can put in information so that when you go to QRZ.com, you can A, make sure your address is right, B, go into the details and make sure your county information is right. And sometimes they have the wrong grid square too, especially the last two digits of it. You can also you also get a biography page where you can put information in if you want. And you get an online logbook where you can upload your log to it. And with that log, you can get free awards. So all this is free. There's paid QRZ subscriptions, but just with the free version, you can go in and set up your biography and adjust all your settings. So you want to go to QRZ and make sure all that is correct. EQSL is a free QSLing system. And again, I have a lot more in my QSLing talk on that, on Clublog also. Any questions on those versions, those sources of news and information? Let's talk a little bit about awards. This is one of the first awards. The two most common awards I think people apply for are probably Worked All States and Worked All Continents. And this is an example of a very recent Worked All States certificate. It doesn't have my name on it because mine's a really old one. Mine is from I think I got mine in 83 or 84. I can't remember for sure what year I got my Worked All States. I do remember the last station I worked was in Nebraska. My next to the last station though was Hawaii, and that was Nose. I forget his first name. He used to be hang out in the novice bands. I worked him on 15-meter CW in the novice bands to get my Hawaii. So once your workstations, you need to confirm the QSOs with QSLs, and there's a couple different ways to do this. One with QSL cards. Another way to do it is with electronic QSLing, and I'll talk a little bit more about those a little bit later here. So you can confirm QSLs direct, where you have to spend money to send it to the person, then spend money to get it back to you. You can do it through the QSL Bureau, where you send it as a big package, then it gets shipped out, and it's a lot cheaper postage-wise, but there is a fee involved with it, but it is slow. You can expect the fastest card I think I've ever gotten from the Bureau is 3 months, and the longest one, I don't know yet because I'm still getting cards from the 80s through the Bureau. So the Bureau takes a long time. Logbook of the World, EQSL are both electronic versions of logging, and I have workstations, and within a minute, I've gotten a Logbook of the World confirmation back. Especially with the digital modes like FT8 and FT4, where it's already in the computer, people are uploading their logs automatically, and you're getting very fast QSLing electronically from those methods. The fourth one here, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with it. It's fairly new. It's called OQRS, and it basically stands for Online QSL Request. And there's no one place to do this at. There's a number of different places you can do OQRS, but you go to websites and you actually request a card online, and then it comes to you as a physical card via the Bureau or directly. Some of them have a fee, some are free. Let me just go out here real quick and show you an example. The one I use the most is Clublog. So if I go in here under Clublog and go to, let's go to QSL charts. If I see this little OQRS, that means that the station offers online QSL request. And if I click on this, I've already requested this, but it says if I want to order it direct and have it mailed to me, it's £4. If I want to do it via the Bureau, it's free in this case. And this person, if I order one card, the other cards are free. Now, usually what they do is they'll just print my reply on one card. And I don't think there's any that I have not requested yet. Let me see real quick here. This one's been requested. Matter of fact, I paid the $5 to get that one shipped to me. And these are all requested. I know one that I didn't request the one. Let me just go down here real quick to Aruba. Oh, no, it's already gone. So that's one way to do it. There's other sites that have OQRS also. Helps if you spell it right. Let me just bring up the presentation real quick here. This is the presentation I did on QSLing. It's tiny.cc/QX3. And again, that's the link for that. And the link is in the slideshow today also. But I just want to go real quick down here to OQRS. So this is the way the OQRS works. You find the station as OQRS, and then you request it either via the Bureau or direct, and then the card comes to you in your mailbox. Clublog is the one I showed you before, but these other sites all have OQRS capability on them to various extents. When you go to the site, you'll find out what stations they support. They don't know, there's no one place to go for everyone. So there's pros and cons to all the different methods. Direct cards, you get a physical card. It's not, you don't have to do anything really special, but they're expensive. It takes time to fill out all the addressing information. You have to have a way for them to send back the card to you. Now, if it's a U.S. station, you can send a self-addressed stamped envelope, but that doesn't work for foreign cards because they can't use U.S. postage. Most of the time what happens nowadays is people will send a couple dollars. They call them green stamps, but there's some countries where green stamps we're having U.S. currency is illegal, so you don't want to do that if that's the case. The bureau is less expensive, but it's a lot slower. And the problem is not everyone uses the bureau. In some countries don't even have bureaus. Logbook of the World is very quick, easy, less expensive. The problem is there's no physical cards to put on your wall or to show off to your friends. EQSL is again quick and easy, but they do have a physical card that comes to you in the form of a PDF. I'm sorry, an MP3, not a graphic image file, so you can bring that up and see it. And this is the presentation I talked about. So most awards require that you have proof of working the station and proof of QSL. A QSL would be the proof of that. Sometimes you need to send the cards to them as proof, but most of the time they have different ways that you can have your cards checked by card checkers. AWRL has what they call field checkers available at Hamfest. I'm not sure if anyone in your club's a field checker. Do you have a field checker in your club? Okay, there's probably one at a local club near you that probably you see at Hamfest. For some smaller awards, they'll let you send a list of QSL cards and verified by 2 ham witnesses. Now, what's neat is some of the awards are available without you having to send anything at all because they have the logs of other people, so they can check the log themselves. So like Islands on the Air, because people submit their cards to them, they have a record of all, their logs to them, they have a record of all the logs, so they can match them up that way. So contests are, as Bob said on the list here, contests are the quickest and easy way to get worked all states, and I definitely agree with that. And being a low-powered operator like I am, contests are a great place because I don't have to try as hard because they want my contact. So it's remarkable how much louder I am when they get points for working me. There's some contests that are good for specific awards. The CQ Worldwide and the WPX contest are really good for getting DX awards, and they are on all 3 modes throughout the year, so they're very good for the different modes and for DX. The AWRL is another good place to get DX cards, but the CQ Worldwide and the AWRL DX are not a good place to get domestic awards because you can't work domestic stations. So that's not the place you'd want to go if you want to work all states. The better place to go for that is the AWRL sweepstakes and the individual QSO parties that the states have. There's a party for almost every state. Some of them are combined as regional ones. This last weekend was the one call district. All the states from New England were in that, and you could work all the states very easily that are in that group very quickly during that type of thing. So for worked all states, the AWRL sweepstakes, the RIDI Roundup, the North American QSO parties, the field day, and of course the state QSO parties. This year they're running something special with the state QSO parties. It's called the State QSO Party Challenge. And what they're doing is taking all the state QSO parties and combining your scores and multiplying it by the number of contests you're in. So you'll see here, if we look at the scores, this station N0HJZ has worked 5,428 combined contacts in the 23 contests he's worked in so far. There's been 23. There'll be 47 by the end of the year. I'm down a little bit on the list, but I'm still not too far down. Oops, I didn't do the right thing there. Let's try that again. There I am. So you notice I'm not too far from the top, but I'm far from the bottom, which is good. And the trick is I just want to see if I can work all 47 contests. And I got 23 so far, so I'm still doing well. And these are the list of when the state QSO parties are throughout the year. Ohio's party's in August. Any questions about awards so far? Well, I originally started contesting not to win contests, but I wanted to work DX. And so I was already working contests to get DX awards. I wasn't doing it to win contests. But eventually what happened is I got a little bit better at it, and my station got a little bit better, and I start finishing near the top. So you can contest to actually win a contest instead of doing it to just get awards. And as the years have went on, there's certain contests I'm serious about working, so I will try and put my maximum effort in with the seat in the butt for as much time as possible to try and get the best score as possible. And I've been pretty lucky. I've came in first in the CQ Worldwide QRP category, first in the U.S. a couple times. So I got a couple trophies on the wall here, and I just got the results from the CW contest. I was number 1 in the U.S. and number 1 in North America for QRP assisted CQ Worldwide last year. This is an award from back in 2015. I was number 1 in the U.S. and number 8 in the world, number 1 in North America. So I got a trophy for this, which is on the wall. These are trophies at K3LR over in West Middlesex, Pennsylvania. He's got walls and walls of trophies. I only have 3. I have a 4th one on its way I should be getting. So I have, this is not on my normal wall. This was just taken with my radio that I got all the awards on. There's Tim Duffy, K3LR, and that's one wall of 3 walls that they have awards in the shack there. Now, whenever I operated a contest, I always try and send in an entry, even if I didn't work a lot of stations. You notice here my score is only 80, but this was the this was the VHF contest, and I was in Albuquerque for a meeting for that week, and I got there early on Sunday, so I had my FT817, and all I had was the little rubber duck antenna that comes on it for 6 meters, and I went out on the balcony of the hotel, and I used the railing of the balcony in some places and the spouting on the motel for reflectors, and I worked all the way into Minnesota from New Mexico. As it turned out, I sent in my thing, and I got first place in the New Mexico section. So even though I was just messing around on the balcony with my radio, I still ended up getting first place in that. So whenever you work a contest, send your log in. These are all contest calendars that are available to tell you when contests are going to be held. One of my favorites is the W7. Oops, let's try that again. For some reason, the link didn't work, so we'll type it in. So this is a contest calendar, and if I go in there and look at the 8 days, these are the contests in the next 8 days. I can click on it and find out more information about it. Nothing real exciting next week. There's only one QSO party. It's in Arkansas, and it gives you all the details, what the exchange is, the time, the bands, the modes, and here's where you find the rules. It tells you how to submit a log. You email your log in for this particular one. So this is just one of a couple calendars. This one's pretty neat. The DL2NBY calendar is a Google calendar. So what you do is you click on it, and then it adds the calendar to your Google calendar, and you can see it that way. So, and he has multiple calendars. I'm not sure why the link isn't working here right now. You just go into this real quick, and I'll do it from there. So on this is Google Calendars, and you can come down and click on the little plus sign, and you can add these to your calendars if you want to. I already have it in mind, so I don't want to add it again, but you can add those to them. You can also choose which ones you want. He has different calendars available here. So this is HF contests and parties, but you can also drop down and you can see just the ones that you want to see. The AWL contest calendar is another place for calendars. Oh, just let me mention something real quick down here. The National Contest Journal is another publication by the ARRL. You had to pay for it separately, but as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, it's now free for members of the ARRL. You can read it online for free. Both the QEX and NCJ are now both available in addition to QST if you're a member. Contest University is a great place to learn about different operating skills. And this year, you don't have to pay to go. It is free. You can sign up for it. It's going to be held online this year as opposed to being in person. And I've went a number of years, and I've always found it extremely helpful. And I included the link to the Contest University at the end of the Zoom help section. So when you go to the end of this Zoom help, there's a thing for the Contest University link right here in the Zoom help that that was sent out to you via email. Now, I like to keep an extensive list of the countries I need and the states I need by band and mode, so I can always tell what I want, what I need as a new one. And part of it is because I'm a little bit obsessive. You'll see here in a few minutes, I keep them all in spreadsheets in addition to my log, so I can sort through them. One of the things that's helpful if you're trying to work states is know which states are rare, so you spend more time. If it's a really rare state on a band that you've not worked at before, you might want to spend a little bit more time because the chance of hearing another one is really low. So your chance of working an Ohio station, no matter where you're at in the United States, are extremely high because we have a large percentage of large percentage of the population that are hams here relative to other places. And I'll show you some of those statistics in a moment here. So here's ham population by state, and this is from 2018. But you notice the most hams are in California by sheer number, 106,000 hams. Whereas when you look at somewhere like North Dakota, there's only 1,500 hams. And I love to play with statistics and spreadsheets. So what I did is I also calculated the percentage of population. So 0.027% of California is hams, but if you look, almost twice the percentage in Utah. Almost twice the percentage in Idaho. So even though there's not a lot of hams there, the percentage per population is pretty high. Now, as I said, some of these are a little hard to see. They're much easier to see in my presentation, but this is comparing how many states I've worked with the population. So if I look at my totals, you'll see that California is the highest, which you would expect because there's the most hams there. Ohio is second highest, of course, because I've lived in Ohio. So even though Texas is more common here, you'll see that I have more Ohio stations than Texas, which I'm sure most of you have in your logs. And I just went through and looked at the different stations, compared my results with the population results, and they match up for the most part. You'll notice there's some things are very much outliers. For example, if it's in blue, that means I've worked more than the number. So for example, Maryland, I've worked a lot more than the percentage. Connecticut, probably because of W1AW partly, I've worked a lot more of Connecticut, worked a lot more in New Hampshire than the ranking of the state. And that's partly because of I always participate in the New England QSO party. This is my 11 band QRP worked all states. So I've now completed all 50 states on all of these 11 bands. My last state was South Dakota on 60 meters, and I worked that last year. Now you notice even during this, even though I've worked all these states, some of them I've only worked them by the slimmest of margins. So Delaware, where there's not many hams, there's still 2 bands where I've only worked 1 Delaware. This is a breakdown of number of hams by country. I don't know. I think Thailand is not right here. That number is just ridiculously high for what I think the number of hams are in Thailand, but I don't know. But this just gives you an idea of how many hams there are in each of the countries. And you'll notice that my countries that I've worked pretty much match up very similar with the number that's there for each of the states. Let me just bring up this sheet 1 second here. being I have a live connection, I can actually show you the live slides. This is my log that I keep in the spreadsheet. I export it from my log a couple times a week. And I'm up to 85,000 contacts now. But I can go in and look at things like number of QSOs by year. Last year was a milestone for me. It's the first year that I exceeded 10,000 contacts in 1 year. This year I'm at 33,000. So I'm on pace to match last year at least. This is my QSOs by mode. And if you notice, this is my all-time modes on HF. I started HF in 1983. And this is 2018. What happened? Well, FT8 came out and I ended up spending half my time on FT8. 2019 came out and FT4 came out and I spent over 20% of my time on FT4. So there's been a lot of change in that. This is DXCC. This is my DXCC by mode. And the reason I want to show you this, I want to just show you real quick. These are the rankings of countries by the total number of DX I've worked. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the mode, and you'll see that these change. So just take a look here real quick. And then when I change the mode, if I go to CW, you'll see that some of the countries are more active on CW than they are on different modes. If I go to single sideband, again, they'll change. And a lot of this also has to do with how active these countries are in contesting. These are the top countries I worked. That's the chart I was showing you that this came from. This is impossible to read. Just gives you an idea. If you look over here on the 160 end of things in each of these, there's a lot less 160 than there is 20 meters and 17 and 15. So with my low power station, 160 is definitely the hardest band for me to work DX on. And here's the slide that showing you the modes over years, how it's changed. So one of my goals over the years is to work DXCC in a single weekend. And I finally did it just a few years ago in the CQ Worldwide. I just squeaked it out. I got 103 countries in one weekend during the during the CQ Worldwide single sideband contest. Oh, we got someone new just arrived. Mr. Samsung. And these are the QSOs by band and by mode over the years. Now, one of the complaints I hear a lot about FT8 and FT4 and JT65 is that everyone's just working those modes and not working anything else. What I want to show you is this chart shows something very interesting. Even though I worked a lot of FT8 and FT4, I tended to work it on bands that I didn't work a lot of CW or phone on. So you notice that 12 meters went way up, 17 meters went way up, 30 meters went way up. And look what happened with 60 meters. I hardly ever worked 60 meters, but when FT8 and FT4 came out, all of a sudden, I start making a lot more contacts there. Any questions on any of the statistics? I know if you're not a statistics person, that probably bored you to death, but I love playing with spreadsheets. So let's talk a little bit about your station at home. And I always get this question, what's the best antenna to have at the house? And I always say, I can't answer that question, but what I can answer is what the worst antenna is to have. So this is my list of the 4 worst types of antennas to have at your house. Number 1 on the list is no antenna at all. It doesn't work very well at all. It's the worst antenna you could have. The second worst antenna is one that you have at your house, but it's still in the package. It hasn't been assembled or put up yet. Now, once you get it assembled, but you don't install it yet, it's a little bit better, but still not a lot better unless you connect the cable to it. So if it's laying on the floor of your garage, it'll still work, but not as good once you get it up on the tower or up on the pole. And unfortunately, the 4th worst one is one that a lot of us still have. And that's an antenna that either was not installed right from the beginning or assembled right from the beginning, or has deteriorated over years. The coax has deteriorated, the connections have deteriorated, elements have broken off, screws have fallen out, traps have filled up with spiders and then water and then ice and then broke apart. So those are the 4 worst antennas out there, and I'm sure that some of you might have one of these 4 antennas at your location right now. Now, one of the things you can do is you can just go all mobile, all bands. Has anyone seen this car before? He's from Cuyahoga County, so you might not see him down your way very often, but I tend to see him at Hamfest around here. I do have some information on home HF antenna choices. The 4 different general areas I list on this little chart is verticals, beams, wire antennas, and magnetic loops. Now, a lot of hams, when they first get the license, say, well, boy, that vertical looks really good. I can just put that right there. It only takes up a couple inches of space, and I don't need to put all these other things up. Well, the problem is, for most verticals to work, you need to actually put radials underneath them. So you do need a little bit more space to stretch those out. And vertical doesn't work real well when it's up against your aluminum siding. So even though it seems like it's a panacea, it doesn't always work out that great. You still need to put radials down. You still need to not have it interfere with other things. And the radiation angle is usually not very good for close-in stuff. It's usually much better for distant stuff. A beam antenna, on the other hand, is a great way. It has a lot of great gain and directivity. It works very well, but it becomes much more expensive because not only do you need the antenna itself, but you have to put it up on something, and then you have to have something to turn it with. So not only does it cost money, but it also costs time. And a couple of years ago, I had my cable, I had a little accident on my tower where the cable that brings my hazer unit down from the top broke, so I couldn't go up there to fix it. And my antenna was frozen in one direction for about 6 months until I got someone to come out with a lift truck and go up there and we could release it. So it's definitely not the easiest thing to have. And also sometimes your other people that live in your house might not like it, or your neighbors may not like it. I like the fact that both of my neighbors moved in after I was already here. Matter of fact, one just moved in a couple of weeks ago, and I make sure they always see my tower predominantly when they're looking at the house so that they'll not be able to complain later. Wire antennas are cheap, and they're a great way to experiment, and they work very well if you can get them up in the right place. They don't have the gain of a beam, but they're a lot cheaper. So a lot of people use wire antennas. I just want to let me talk about those first 3. The best one to have of all 3 of those is to have all 3, because they all have pluses and minuses. So if you can get all 3 of those on your property, you're much better off than having any one single one. Magnetic loops seem like a very good idea because they're very small, they're very portable, they don't require a lot of installation. They're not real expensive, considering that you don't have to spend a lot of extra money for them afterward. One of the problems with them, though, is they have very narrow bandwidth. So whenever you change your frequency, you have to adjust the tuning on it. Some are a little bit tricky to tune. One of the good things, though, is if you're working FT8 or FT4, you don't change locations on the band. You plop down on one frequency, so you can stay there for a long period of time, and magnetic loops are very good for that. So this is my house, a picture of my tower and my antenna. You notice I don't have a really big spot. My lot is only 166 feet deep and 74 foot wide, but I've squeezed the DX engineering vertical right here, and then the ground radios run all the way around to the side of the driveway, and all the way around to the side of the house, and all the way back in here to the edge of the fence, which is right here. My beam is on the only spot in my property that it fits. And coming off that, I have a dual sloper. One leg of the sloper, the longer leg, is tied off to the chain link fence, which is behind a tree here, and it's pointed towards Europe, and it works pretty well. And then the other one is the 160 sloper. It's only a 60-foot piece of wire with a coil in it, loading coil in it, and it comes down to the ground here, so it's not real high. But that's my antenna setup. Here's a little bit of view from the top. You can see the the antenna. This tree is no longer here, but they haven't taken a new picture of the 3D view. If you don't have a place for an antenna at your house, you can always do portable operation. You can set up your HF antenna like this. Of course, this is at Walmart. Or you can go up in the mountains with something called SOTA, which is Summits on the Air. And this guy has goats that go with him. You don't have to bring goats with you when you go to do it. You can still just be as successful with SOTA without goats, I think. Well, this guy here from World War I has his setup to go. The most important thing, though, is to spend time operating. That's how you get better. That's how you get awards. That's how you make more contacts. So I like to operate. One of the other things about amateur radio, fortunately, is there's a lot of different things you can do. And sometimes we get a little bit burnt out on one area. So think about trying out something new. It's a great thing to try something new. You can try out digital modes. You can try out satellites, VHF, solar power, field day, CW. There's just hundreds of different things you can do all the time. One of the best ways to learn about amateur radio is to teach. I'm not sure if any of you, guys teach classes locally there or put presentations on for clubs, but it's a great way to really get more information. Number 10, I never really could understand people that are jerks on the air. I think there should be an award, Jerks on the Air, JOTA, different kinds of JOTA as opposed to this guy that's jerks on the air. I want people to remember my call sign so they can pick me out of a pile-up. I don't want people to remember my call sign because I was a really jerk on the air. So remember that your call sign should be remembered for the right reasons, not for the bad ones. So I have some other presentations, and I have links to them here. I have a bunch of other resources. Most of these are on my website. Here's getting a link to the presentation today. Here's my contact information. That's it. So, questions, comments, complaints?
Very good presentation, Paul, NAIG.
Thank you. Other questions? Oh, you guys have to have questions.
I got a question out of curiosity.
Yes.
What made you decide to focus more on QRP?
Well, here's what happened. Before I got my radio license, when I was a Boy Scout, I saw an advertisement for a 10 Tech, what was it? PM series. I'll just pop up one here. Just grab a random video. So this was so it was a bunch of modules inside a little chassis. But the thing was, you could operate it with a battery, and I always thought that'd be neat to take camping with me when I was a scout. But unfortunately, back in early 70s, when I was looking at this radio and lusting after in magazines, it cost $57, and $57 in my pay scale in 1970s was like half a year's worth of money in my paper route. So I never did buy one, and I never got my license at the time because I really didn't know how to go about getting my license. So fast forward, after college and after I got married, my wife saw an ad in the paper for ham radio classes, so I decided to sign up and go to ham radio classes and got my license. And when it was time to buy a radio, I said, well, I want to buy one of those 10 Tech radios. Now, I also had learned in the meantime that they came out with a new radio called the 10 Tech Argonaut. just get some images here. So this was the Ten-Tech Argonaut 509, and this is what I planned on getting. So I went to shopping for one. This was in September of 1981, and it was no longer available. It had been replaced by the 515. So I purchased the Ten-Tech 515. No one told me that as a novice you weren't supposed to start with a QRP radio. So I purchased one of these, and it had 5 watts input, which meant its output was about 2.5 watts on all the bands. And that's how I got started. And no one ever told me you weren't supposed to start with something like that. So I ended up starting with low power. And I still have that radio. It's still downstairs on my workbench. And I still take it out once or twice a year and play with it. It's still fun to play with. It doesn't have a lot of filtering to it. Well, it has a little bit of filtering because I have the external filter, which made a big difference. The CW filter made a big difference. And that's just how I got started. And 80-some thousand contacts later, I just never really did much on high power. Occasionally I do when I work special event stations. When I'm the special event station, I'll work, or when I work satellites, sometimes I'll work 15 or 20 watts. That'll be high power for me. I don't know. I just always have stuck with low power. And once I've done it, I found out I can be competitive in the low power categories in contests. So I've just stuck with it. So that, to answer your question in a long-about way, it's because I didn't know any better.
The little Ten-Tech that you showed a couple slides ago, I
Yes.
still got one of those sitting on the shelf.
Oh, I got a whole stack of them downstairs. When my kids were toddlers, when we go to Hamfest, they knew what a PM series, they knew what all the Ten-Tech, the Argonauts looked like, and they would find them for me in the Hamfest. Over the years, there were 800 and some. There was approximately 850 515s built. I've owned 3 of them. I still have one. Of the 509s, I've owned over 30 of. I've owned over 3 dozen 509s and about a half a dozen 505s. They come home, they get fixed up, they go back out again. I think I probably right now I have one 515. I probably have. I'm guessing I have probably 4 or 5 509s, one 505, and probably 4 PM series.
What was the model number of that first one?
The first one was the PM series. There was a PM1, PM2, and PM3. Oh, we're gonna get that stupid ad again.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, and that's a direct conversion receiver. And the other interesting thing is if you smack the counter next to that, it has such magnaphonics in it, it'll blow your ears out from a smack nearby the radio. And it's very wideband, and you can pick up all the broadcast stations in addition to the 40-meter stations on it. But they were fun to play with. They're still fun to play with. But they're getting a little old. The capacitors are starting to go a little bit in them and stuff like that. But it was just a fun little direct conversion receiver. And this dowel cord here just hangs over the edge. Let's see if this one shows a picture of the inside. On my website, I have a section on the different radio brands. If you go to the Ten-Tech section, I have a presentation I did for the Cuyahoga County Amateur Radio Club, and I've done a couple places since then. And I also wrote an article for a newsletter in 2003 called The Odyssey of the Argonauts. And when I've done this program in the past, I've brought all the Argonauts with me to the program. These are pictures of the ones in my shack. These are actually mine. This is the first digital one. This is the Argonaut 2, the 503, the 535, the Argonaut 5. And this article was written before the 506 came out. I have a 506 now. I sold my 503, my 5. I don't have that anymore. But they were very interesting radios. Other questions? So what is your club planning on doing for field day?
Well, I'm not 100% certain what we'll be doing. I guess my speculation is depending on the social distancing requirements and stuff. I don't know if we'll all get together or if we'll operate from home or exactly what yet.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case with a lot of clubs around Ohio, that it's going to be, even if they do loosen things up a little bit, we're not a very good, I know that I'm a 65-year-old plus person, and I know a lot of people in our club are too. So um, we have a lot of high risk people in the hobby right now. Now, what I typically did for years for field day, I did it with our club, and then probably I think it was about 2005 or so. My wife and I started taking vacations every year on field day, and we would go somewhere and operate. So we went to East Glacier National. We went to East Glacier outside of Glacier National Park one year. We went out on the train, did that one year. So we operated from Montana. We went down to West Virginia 4 different places and different times. I've operated from Vermont last year, Delaware 2 years before that, 2 different times from Delaware, and operated from Cadillac Mountain in Acadia National Park in Maine 1 year. So my wife already knows the routine. The routine is it can't be a state that has multiple sections. It has to be somewhere that there's not a lot of hams, and preferably somewhere that has a nice exchange. So Maine's a real nice place to operate from, and Vermont was fun last year. Delaware was a lot of fun. The problem with Delaware, I found out, is not so much during field day, although it did occur during field day. When you would send your state, people would think you were sending DE, like you were on CW. They think you were sending DE. So they didn't understand you were sending Delaware, which I didn't understand why they would get confused, but they did. But I was at a cabin in Delaware, and after field day, operated a lot of FT8, and a lot of stations wanted to get Delaware and FT8, so I put a lot of Delaware in people's logs that week.
Yeah,
Any
this
other-
is Arnold. I
Yes.
finally got online here.
I saw
We're
what you
not
did.
that far advanced in our discussions about field day or for ourselves yet.
Well, I pointed out to Ed earlier, and I'll share that with you. I just wrote an article. I just did a slide presentation and an article for the Ohio section newsletters on field day. It's called Field Day in a Socially Distancing.
Yeah, I saw that when it came up.
Yeah, so there's a link to that, and it's available right here. This is the link, tiny.cc/fd-sd. Any other questions? Well, it's been a pleasure, everyone. Thank you very much.
I'd like to say thank you to
Thank
you,
you.
Anthony, for doing this for us.
You're very welcome. And here's your homework.
Quiz at noon, huh?
No, there's no quiz. You just have to go through all the other presentations I have. Right. At the
Well, there
beginning
were
here.
quite a number there, and I just had to make a random pick earlier this morning. But didn't realize I was picking the longest presentation for you. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's no problem. It's no problem at all. But my wife said, "What presentation are you doing tonight?" She asked me yesterday. She said, "What presentation are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "I'm not sure yet." I said, "As long as they give me at least 2 minutes to decide to pick out the right slides before I start."
Well, that's what I was trying to do for you this morning, but nobody had a strong inclination one way or the other, so I just wound up picking one today.
Well, all the
Thank you very
presentations
much.
are available, and I'll make sure that there's no slide in here that has a link to all the presentations, but I'll put a slide in this presentation from today so that you'll have a link to them. So again, this is the presentation today if you want to share that with the club. And I've recorded this session, so I'll chop off the beginning and the end, and I'll make it available, and I'll send you a link when it's available.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.